How did the Gunlance's popularity double? Twice. You could say, duh, it's a cool weapon. It's a stick that explodes. Alright, but maybe there's more going on? The Gunlance was the least played weapon in Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate with a usage of 1.4%. So that is 14th place. It then went up to 12th place in Monster Hunter World with 3%, which is slightly more than double the usage. It then went up again from 3 to 3.2% in Sunbreak, but actually went down in ranking to 13th place as other weapons, mainly the hunting horn, increased even more. And in Wilds it landed on the 8th place with 6%, another doubling of its usage. So why did it double twice? And why did it score so low in the first place? Well, when Gunlance first came out in Monster Hunter DOS, the emphasis was on the lance part, meaning that most damage was dealt by poking. This was exaggerated by the fact that shelling took a lot of sharpness and the whetstones available were limited per quest. Combine this with a reload animation leaving you open for attacks, and the game is basically punishing you for using the gun part of this weapon. This, in combination with the lack of mobility and poor defensive options, made the Gunlance an unpopular choice, which was kind of ironic because it obviously came with a massive shield. But blocking was hard, as you had to finish long recovery animations before you could block, and because of this, evading was often more viable as the sidestep was more effective than blocking. But since other weapons could dodge even better, the Gunlance wasn't very popular, which is why they removed it from the game completely in Monster Hunter Tri. Yeah, that's right.
Be gone!
The weapon was not present in Monster Hunter Tri together with dual blades, hunting horn and bow. Why? Well, Capcom works in mysterious ways. Yeah, nobody really knows. The weapon then made a return in 3 Ultimate, and even though the Gunlance was pretty mid-tier in this game if we look at damage output, it at least had an advantage in underwater fights, as guarding was a lot easier than dodging underwater. But on land, it was still outperformed by nearly all other weapons, both defensively and offensively. Most people actually don't know this, but the Gunlance was less mobile than the lance, as you could only dodge once instead of 3 times in a row with the lance. That's right, those big guns are slowing you down. In this third generation, the Gunlance gained the overhead slash attack, and even though it was cool and had nice reach, it added yet another long heavy commitment attack to the weapon, and already had that reach with the running upward poke. It did however allow you to unleash all shells at the same time, dealing a lot of burst damage. It also gained the quick reload, which allows you to reload faster if performed after an attack. And this also comboed into the slam attack. Now, even though some of these changes were really nice, it didn't really fix its main issue, lack of mobility and slow defensive options, as the recovery animations after an attack are still longer than simply picking the lance.
Got him!
In Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate, the Gunlance got a heat gauge which would increase your damage after firing shells. You could even get up to 20% extra damage. And even though I like the idea of this mechanic, it really was a nerf compared to Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate, the game that came before it. Because in 4 Ultimate, the base damage was what full damage is with this 20% buff. Combine this with the fact that the gauge can also overcharge, reducing your damage output instead, and you probably won't be surprised to hear that most people thought that managing the gauge was a chore, which is why it's still not very popular in Generations Ultimate. Even though they had some hunter arts that would help with this, it was clear that Capcom had a hard time trying to balance this weapon, and I think that one of the main reasons for this was the shells that ignore hit zones. This means that the damage of the shells is always the same, no matter if they hit a weak spot or not. It also can't bounce on hard monster parts, and this makes it harder to balance as it can quickly become OP if made too powerful. And I'm guessing that Capcom doesn't want another weapon on the level of the heavy bowgun, rapid firing pierce like in Generations Ultimate. Gosh, that weapon was OP as heck. The Valor style in Generations Ultimate introduced what would later become the guard reload in Monster Hunter Rise. And to me, this is the first time I actually found the weapon somewhat fun to play, because I actually felt like I could block things in time for an attack without stopping my own attacks 3 days in advance, as you didn't have to deal with stupidly long recovery animations as much. Generations Ultimate clearly added some of the best moves to the weapon. Blast Dash was probably the best, as it added some well needed mobility to the weapon, even though it was still just a hunter art in this game. They also reduced the amount of sharpness that shelling used, making this a bigger part of the bread and butter weapon combos. It seemed like this was the first time that the developers recognized its explosive potential, as they also added Dragon Blast to the game and AA Flare, some of the most badass moves of any weapon in Monster Hunter for that matter. And still, after all this, its pick rate was a low 1.4%, which I can only assume is still due to the lack of mobility in combination with mid damage output. If it wasn't for the styles in this game, the Gunlance would almost be worse than previous titles due to the nerf and base damage. It also didn't help that shelling, especially white shelling, still sent your teammates flying further than Team Rocket, making it harder to use this in multiplayer without pissing off the entire lobby. In Monster Hunter World, we saw the usage of the weapon essentially double, from 1.4% to 3%. This is probably due to the fact that its shellings got major buffs, as they finally seem to realize that people play the gunlance mostly for the gun part. It honestly took them a bit too long. I suspect that the gunlance also got seen quite a bit more, as it did surprisingly well in certain speedruns in this game. This was mostly due to its crazy ledge game, which could be used to spam ledge attacks by hopping backwards off a ledge into a slam attack. You could spam this over and over and over again really fast. There was also a snowman bug that made your worm stake attack more powerful, allowing you to kill Fatalis under 4 minutes. But for the average folk, it wasn't as appealing. The amount of armor skills required to optimize a set were also quite high, but at the same time, it was also not surprising that its popularity went up. I mean, some of the major changes in World were the addition of a worm stake, more accessible quick reload, a new wide sweep attack, but the main one in my opinion was the amount of dodges. You can now perform the sidestep in any direction, also forward and consecutively. This may not seem like much, but greatly improved mobility, especially if combined with the Vade extender. And this is where most people finally considered this weapon a viable choice, and I can see why. But personally, I still thought it wasn't good enough. Now wait, don't get mad at me. Hear me out, alright? I promise you it'll make sense. To me, it didn't make sense to rely on the evasion skills to make it viable while carrying around a massive shield. I mean, what do you think this is? A 10-inch solid steel designer handbag? This thing ain't for looks. But check out any endgame fight in Monster Hunter World and you'll see people use dodges over blocking like 98% of the time, as it's still the better option. Shouldn't this shield be the main defensive option? Or be viable at least like half of the time? It certainly is for the lance. In Monster Hunter Rise, the usage was 3.2%. A mere 0.2% increase. And even though this wasn't much, it was enough not to get last place, as that now went to the lance. As a lance main, that hurt. Rise added the guard reload as a switch skill. Now in my opinion, this skill is essential and I would not play the gunlance without it, as this is where I considered the gunlance viable, as you could finally block in time and did not have to rely on the style like you did in Generations Ultimate. But for most people, they just like the fact that Blast Dash was now part of the base moveset. Monster Hunter Rise added an insane amount of mobility, so much that in some places you can fly over half the map by chaining together Blast Dashes. I'm not that good at this, perhaps you can go even further. You could also stay airborne for a while by chaining together shells while in the air, but since all other weapons also got a lot more mobility, this weapon was still one of the clunkier ones when it came to fighting, which is not going to change as it's simply part of the weapon. Same with all other slow weapons. But if the majority of the players don't like the slow weapons, then why was its popularity still going up? Well, perhaps it's time to stop looking at all its moves, stop comparing the weapon for a second and take a look at how it feels to play this boomstick. Are you finally starting to understand now? It may be clunky and defensive, but it's also satisfying and explosive. And no amount of analyzing this weapon is going to put that into words. But guess what? We're not done yet. Monster Hunter Wilds made it so that you can now move sideways while attacking, increasing mobility even more. The guard reload is now part of the base moveset. The long recovery animations are gone, making blocking easier. You can now move while shelling. They made all combos smoother with new attacks. And you get 2 Wyvern's fires? God damn! I guess it should come as no surprise that in Monster Hunter Wilds the gunlance usage went from 3.2 to 6%, once again roughly double the amount, even after losing the blast dash. And it makes sense, the changes in this game were really good, and I suspect that this increase in popularity is also due to the amount of exposure that this weapon received in Monster Hunter World and how certain people of influence praise this weapon.
Gunlance is not just a weapon, it's a way of life. It's not even just a weapon that you choose, it is a weapon that chooses you. You don't become a Gunlance main. You were born a Gunlance main, you just didn't know it yet.
Personally though, I don't care how popular the Gunlance is in Wilds, as long as it doesn't have the Dragon Blast and the AA Flare move, it'll never be perfect to me. I just want to be a walking nuke, okay? It seems like the Gunlance is in a good place now, and all shield weapons that walk at this speed will never really get very popular, as it's just not appealing to the majority of the players, and that's fine. Some weapons have to be near the bottom, right? I would like the popularity still to be a bit better divided, and the skill system of Monster Hunter Wilds doesn't help, as weapon specific skills like guard have to be on your weapon, decreasing opportunity to slot in attack skills. Now this is not a major issue, but if we would like to see a more even distribution of weapon usage, then this certainly doesn't help, which is why I'm still on the fence about Wild's skill system. But I'm honestly waiting for the DLC to come to a real conclusion, as that's the true endgame. But regardless, this weapon is in a great spot, fun to play and at a good usage rate. Have you ever wondered why the longsword is the most played weapon, or why nobody plays the lance? Then check out my channel, and don't forget to like and subscribe while you're there. Thanks for watching!